Hi everyone, this is Clémence with the Gourmandise School in Santa Monica, here to talk to you about wheat. You're all making so much bread. Like, all our feeds are filled with people making bread. Maybe it's just mine, I don't know. But I wanted to give you an idea of where your flour comes from, because it doesn't just grow naturally in a white paper 5-pound bag that you pick up at the supermarket, but it comes from a plant, and that plant is a grass. And there are about 30,000 different varieties of wheat out there, never mind all the other grains that grow in the grass category. So if you were to look at the cultivation of grasses for about the last 10,000 years, you would see that rice and corn were grown in Africa, Asia, and Mesoamerica respectively, and that the Middle East was known for growing wheat. So I'm going to show you two different varieties of wheat because they all look wildly different. There's about 30,000 different kinds of wheat out there in the world, and they can look everywhere from this to this. This is a bearded wheat, this is a really dark wheat, and they grow in different climates. So different kinds of wheat grow in different climates and make very different kinds of bread. That's why it's really fun to look at different kinds of bread and then look at the geography of where that wheat came from, because it kind of determines what kind of bread you're going to get. So wheat is a seed, and every seed on the planet is designed to only do one thing, and that is to make a new plant. I'm going to first break down the anatomy of the seed for you, and then we're going to look at a bunch of different kinds of wheats to look how they all behave differently and all look very different even after you harvest them. So this right here is a seed. If you were to take one of these wheat berries here, one of these seeds, and look at it under the microscope, it would look like this. Every seed on the planet looks like this. It sort of reminds you of an egg too, that a hen will lay, because everything here is designed to protect life. So what we have inside here in this microscopic germ, this is not to scale, is a tiny microscopic thing that will eventually germinate and sprout and grow a new root system and turn into a new plant. Everything in the seed is designed to protect this tiny germ. So on the outside of the seed, you have this protective coating. In the case of wheat, it's called bran. If you've ever had bran flakes, you're having the coat of armor that protects the seed, so that if a bird eats it and poops it out 2 miles later, the germ stays intact until the conditions are right. Every seed on this planet has its own calculator. It determines when the humidity is right and the temperature is right, and it'll sprout at that time. But it can't just sprout without energy. So every seed also has a store of energy in it, and that's starch. So in the case of wheat, it's called endosperm. When you buy white flour at the supermarket, it doesn't come like that in nature. It's sifted out. White flour is only the starch inside the seed, and every different kind of white flour is milled from a different kind of wheat. So when you buy bread flour at the store, they take hard red wheat and they mill it and they separate out the bran, and all you're left with is the strong starch inside that wheat berry. So germ, starchy endosperm, bran. So the difference between your white flour and your whole wheat flour is that white flour is all of this with a bran sifted out and the germ removed. And when you buy whole wheat flour, it's all these parts together. It's really important to know that most flours you're buying at the supermarket have the germ removed, the most nutritious part of the wheat berry. And it's because the germ contains a lot of oil, and that can make the flour go rancid. So sadly, a lot of the wheat that we're buying in the store isn't all the parts that we need in order to make this a really healthy thing, but we're going to talk about where to get really high quality flour that's freshly milled and local to where you live. Okay, so the seeds are harvested out after harvest from these stalks here, and then they're milled, so they need to be crushed somehow. So traditionally this was done between two stones. Modern mills are these big roller mills, these big metal rollers that crush the wheat, but I'm going to show you how it's traditionally done on a stone. So every mill comes with two different surfaces. They're going to crush things together. I'm going to take the hopper off. This is Millie. She was purchased for us by one of the farmers that we work with. So his name's Alex, and his friend Sherry. He and Sherry grow a lot of grains just northeast of here in Tehachapi, which for those of you in Los Angeles is less than 2 hours from here. And they grow rye and Sonora. So this one right here. The wheat that I'm about to mill is grown in Northern California by our friend Nate. It's a hard red wheat. So it's hard and it's red, that means it's going to perform really well for bread, and it's going to have a really intense flavor. So I wanted to show you right here, the bottom stone. This is the one that turns. I'm going to turn a little electricity on here, but before that, mills were turned by humans or by animals or maybe by water or wind power, and it would turn a series of gears that would turn the bottom stone in the mill. The top stone here doesn't move, but it sits either really close or really far away from the bottom stone to give you either a really finely milled flour or a really coarse flour. So I'm going to put the hopper on here. I'm going to turn it and tighten things up so that I get a really fine flour here. I'm not advocating that you should buy one of these mills. They're super fun, but there is an art to milling, and the miller plays a really important role in a good grain economy. They're able to buy a lot of great quality wheat from farmers, and they're also able to know, after many, many years of practice, how best to mill each different kind of grain. Some grains are very starchy, some are not starchy at all, and they all require a very different style of mill. So I'm going to pour some of these wheat berries in here. Let's turn it on, and I'm grateful for electricity. What we have here is 100% stone ground whole grain flour. So it's all the parts of the seed. I'm going to show you real quickly how you would make a refined flour. So I'm going to pour this over a sifter here and sift out the bran so that you can see the difference between the starch and the outside coating, which is the bran. So if I was a manufacturer making white flour, I would do this. Do you see the difference here between the light starchy stuff, and if you were to feel it, it feels like really soft, and this really coarse stuff called bran. So if you're selling white flour, you're gonna mill this and put this in a 5-pound bag and sell it as either bread flour if it was a hard wheat, or as cake flour if it was milled from a soft wheat. And you might sell this stuff here to a cereal company who might make something like bran flakes. So this is how you mill flour and how you separate it out. I prefer whole wheat flour because the starch here has no flavor. All of the flavor and texture in your flour comes from the bran and all the other good parts that tend to be sifted out. So I prefer the flavor and texture of whole wheat flours, and we'll get into that next week in all of our videos that we're going to be posting about bread making. So I wanted to show you real quickly how different kinds of wheats look and how they behave. So over here I have 2 different kinds of hard wheats. Hard in wheat talk means really strong gluten properties. That means that the gluten proteins, and we'll get into this later, we'll have a whole discussion on gluten. There's 2 different gluten proteins. They're going to link together, making these amino acid chains, and eventually we'll create a web by kneading your bread or moving it around or adding water that will help to expand and capture steam and yeast when you're letting bread rise and bake. So hard wheats are really good for bread making. Because the gluten proteins are so efficient at binding together, they don't make fantastic flours for making delicate shortbread cookies or biscuits. When we're making shortbread cookies, biscuits, and pie, we want a lower protein or lower gluten flour, like a soft wheat. So this one here called Sonora is a soft wheat. It's also really light in color. See the difference between these 2? This also comes in a lighter color, so the flavor profile is going to be a lot sweeter and milder. So this is Sonora right here. And Sonora is a soft wheat, and it grows really well in warm climates. So this one grows right here. Over here we've got rye. Not technically wheat. It only has one of those kinds of proteins that link to form a chain. So rye is not technically wheat. This is why there are 2 very different kinds of rye bread. You have deli rye. Deli rye is white bread that has some caraway seeds and rye wheat berries stuck in it. It's a tall bread. It doesn't have a whole lot of rye in it. And then you have traditional rye bread, which is made from a lot of this. And it's very dense. It's like a brick. And that's because it doesn't have that power to expand and lift up. So true rye bread is very dense and really delicious and has a lot of really intense flavor because it's made from whole rye flour. Over here we have a different kind of wheat. This is called durum wheat. Any guess what flour is made by milling this? I'll give you a hint, and it's pasta. So turn over any bag of dried pasta and you'll find semolina flour in the ingredients, and that is milled from a wheat variety called durum. Down here I have 2 grains that are used to make bread, but that are not in the wheat family at all. This is teff, the world's smallest grain, and teff is used to make an awesome Ethiopian bread called injera. It's like a spongy, thick pancake that's super delicious and really high in antioxidants. Over here we have buckwheat. It's in the sorrel and rhubarb family. It's not even close to these guys over here, but it's really important because it makes a lot of really great flavored stuff. Doesn't have any gluten in it. Not that we're anti-gluten here, we're team gluten, but buckwheat's really interesting, has a lot of really great flavor, and pairs really well with chocolate, as does rye. Chocolate, not wheat, but it is a fermented seed, so it has something to do with bread, and bread and chocolate are my 2 favorite things in life. So that was our Wheat 101 primer. If you have any questions whatsoever, please ask them here on Instagram, or you can email our hotline. We are manning the hotlines 24 hours a day right now. It's hotline@thegourmandiseschool.com. Empty out your fridge, show us what you've got. One of our chefs will get back to you about what to make from it. But if you have any questions about bread making and flour, let us know. Have a great day, and I will see you tomorrow for another talk about flour and wheat.